Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, listen, I know we're still a bit early, but it's such a beautiful day. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to all of you for turning up here. I know you could be punting or sitting in the pub having a Pimm's, watching the sun go down, but you've chosen to be here and to talk about three issues which are absolutely critical for our modern world. One is the future of democracy, not just under Donald Trump, but particularly under Donald Trump. The second is a future of environmental action. And the third is a question of global trade. Are we going to move into a world which embraces globalization or not? And the person who is going to be talking to you this evening has been grappling with all three of those critical issues for many, many years. Jim Bacchus, trained as a lawyer, worked as chief of staff for Al Gore in his campaigns back in the days when he almost became president, were it not for the hanging chads and all that. Then went on to a variety of different roles, including, as I understand it, running the appellate court at the WTO on behalf of America back in the days when America still believed in the WTO and was crusading to support it. He has subsequently been campaigning on green issues, democratic issues, both with a small and a large d, teaching in Florida, which is not an easy place these days to talk about global trade, globalization, green tech, or the question of democracy. But he's been teaching climate change law, international law, for a number of years, and he's associated with the Lauderpack Centre here in Cambridge, as well as King's College. And he has now written this book, which he's going to be talking about, called The Democracy for a Sustainable World. And it's a path from the Pnyx. Not quite sure how to pronounce that, but Pnyx.
You got it right.
Okay, Pnyx. Maybe you can start with telling us what on earth a Pnyx is for those of us who haven't done their Latin or Greek O-level. But anyway, he's going to talk to us for about 15 minutes about the key messages in the book. We're going to have a fireside chat, and then you are all welcome to hurl whatever questions you want at him. So thank you very much indeed, Jim, for being here. And please do come up and tell us what the path from the Pnyx is, why and how we should be fighting for democracy for a sustainable world, and above all else, give us some reasons to feel cheerful.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian and Camiar and everyone at Cambridge. I'm so happy to be here again, and the sun did shine today, which is always welcome to someone from Florida. I will not try to summarize a book of 500 pages, much less the 1,000 footnotes, in the 10 to 15 minutes I've allotted myself here at the outset. But upon request, I will start from this. The path from the Pnyx is the path of democratic participation. And the Pnyx is a largely forgotten, sloping, low hillside about a quarter of a mile from the Acropolis in Athens, in Greece. The Pnyx is where in 508 BC, a renegade aristocrat named Cleisthenes and a lot of Athenian citizens came together to invent something that, to our modern eyes, is the first form of governance to resemble democracy. Indeed, it was much more democratic than what we call democracy today, at least for the citizens of that time and that city-state, who were a minority of those who lived in the region of Athens called Attica. I made a pilgrimage there 11 years ago, and I asked myself at the time, what could these people, these whispering shadows from millennia ago, possibly have to teach us about what we must do today. Then, and even more so now, I am distressed by what is happening with democracy in the world and what is happening with our efforts to achieve global sustainable development. I've written several books on the topic of sustainable development. This is my first time to address the topic of democracy. In my view, democracy and sustainable development are inextricably interrelated. You cannot have one without the other. Why is that? It is through the human development that results from achieving the social, economic, and environmental goals of sustainable development that we as humans, we as citizens, acquire the capability we need to engage in self-government effectively. Likewise, it is the practice of democracy, of true democracy, that alone can give us the will and help us find the way to achieve sustainable development. I have been working on democratic governance and sustainable development since I was younger than any of you in the audience. We have made some accomplishments along the way. We are far, far from where we should be, and we are getting farther away every day. I will not recount all the challenges we face in the world. You know what they are, some of you much better than I do. Looking around as someone who continues to work every day for these causes in many ways around the world, I have concluded that the only way we can truly have democracy and the only way we can truly accomplish sustainable development is if we begin to take democracy seriously. We simply have not done so. No one has done so since those Athenians who came together in assembly on the Pnyx. We must give reality to the central principle of democracy, which is self-rule. We do not have self-rule today. Most countries are not democracies. Most countries that claim to be democracies are only thin democracies. They're only a semblance of democracies. And those that have been truer to being democracies are slipping away from democracy now and toward the precipice of authoritarianism. In the world, there is everywhere a pervasive distrust. People do not trust their leaders. They do not trust a business. They do not trust institutions. They do not trust, especially international institutions. Without trust, effective democracy is not possible, and therefore sustainable development is not possible. What is missing that we could provide that would help provide trust? What is missing is participation. What I believe we are missing and what we need is universal participation by all of humanity in true self-governance. We can talk about what specifically I would do to change that in the question and answer session, but what I propose is a combination globally at every level of governance of securing the best of individual wisdom and the highest of collective wisdom. I would keep our current democratic governmental structures, but I would make them much more democratic, much more responsive. I would create a situation in which every person in the world had an equal opportunity to participate in their own governance. I would do this by improving our forms of representation to create what in the book I describe and explain as right representation, in which merit and not money, personal character and qualities and not political parties would prevail. I would also do what the ancient Greeks did to make their democracy in Athens what it was successfully for 2 centuries, and that is a knowledge network, a system in which the best decisions could be made because the best of collective knowledge was brought forward in decision making. And that would be accomplished through sortition. It would be accomplished through random selection. Some of you are aware of some of the experiments that have been conducted in some places in the world with citizens' juries, citizen assemblies, such as the Global Citizen Assembly at Glasgow in 2021 and COP 2026. I think those are great efforts, but I would do much more than that. I would, in every form of governance worldwide, add circles of participation randomly selected from volunteers everywhere in the world, based on sample pools that would be sought from everywhere in the world from volunteers, and that would increase over time into the millions and many millions. And I would give those circles of participation equal decision-making power in all institutions, ranging from those that are local to those that are global. The United Nations, the Climate COP, the World Trade Organization, every other specialized international institution, treaty assemblies, and more. The failure we have now in the world is a failure of governance, and is only through participatory democratic governance that we can change this, and that we can begin to achieve the goals for sustainable development that the world came together and established a decade ago in New York with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I would also have circles for the future that would advise these decision-making bodies, these circles of participation and these reformed representative groups, on what they should do in order to provide what we in the sustainability business call intergenerational equity. And as I explain in the book, I would again have random selection of these members from volunteers who would be between the ages of 12 and 21. If you don't think someone who is a teenager can make the right decisions about environmental concerns, then you haven't been paying attention lately. In addition, I would have circles of nature. As I explain at length in the book, one of our problems is that we continue to see humanity as separate and apart from nature. We are part of nature. We are animals. We share a kinship with other species on the earth, animate and inanimate alike. And we will not survive unless we change the way in which we think about nature, unless we naturize ourselves. Believe it or not, that is a word. And it's only when we naturize ourselves that we can begin to look to the economic decisions we make in a way that will be sustainable. There were many problems with the original Athenian democracy, let me hasten to say. Women were excluded. Immigrants were excluded. There were tens of thousands of enslaved people who were excluded. This shocks the modern mind. It's not something we like to see. But if we look beyond that to how those who are privileged to be citizens actually govern themselves, that we can see ways in which we can build on the model that they first set. Now, some people with whom I've aired these ideas, first of all, have been surprised that someone who was a member of the Congress of the United States and the chief judge for the World Trade Organization would be making such radical proposals. But to me, I'm merely proceeding from the logical premise of democracy itself to where we need to be going. What we're doing now is not working. It's working less and less every day. What I'm proposing will not be done overnight. I do not expect a single nation state in this world to support what I propose. Nevertheless, and this will be the last point I make before engaging in a question and answer session, why am I so optimistic that this could even be considered or contemplated? Well, first of all, I'm an optimist by nature. And it's obvious that I'm an idealist, but I'm also a practical idealist. I've been privileged myself to serve in legislative, judicial, and administrative roles at every level of governance in my long life of service that I hope is not yet concluded. And I look at the world, and what I see is what's not being noticed now. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of local, regional, and increasingly global networks of people of all kinds who are working for the various sustainable development goals. 40, 50,000 have been notified in various ways to the United Nations. There are probably 10 or 20 times that many out in the world working toward these goals, ending poverty, creating gender equity, educating everyone, protecting the climate, the water, and so much more, who are dedicated to these goals but have never heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Each and every one of these different networks is an experiment in participatory democracy. And we should be reaching out toward and including those networks, as I and some others have already begun to do, in trying to continue to scale up, build up, connect, and transform these networks into what would be voluntary circles of participation that could, in time, surround existing institutions and bring about, ultimately, the changes we seek. Gillian, I'll stop here, and I'll be happy to take any questions that any of you may have.
Fantastic. It's working? Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And that was very inspiring. I forgot the most important thing about your biography, which is so relevant to this. Apart from being the head of the World Trade Organization's chief court twice, you were, of course, in Congress as well. So you've actually been at the coalface of democracy in a very real way.
One of my accomplishments, Gillian, is that I've been able to move the fact that I'm a former member of Congress farther and farther down my resume. This is
well, that's a sign.
This is very helpful at home.
This is a sad sign of the sad state of democracy these days, because in fact that should not be the case. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Before I do, I'm going to talk to you about America in a moment. Before I do, though, I want to say at the back of your book, which is terrific and very thought-provoking, you actually cite John Ruskin, who, of course, is incredibly relevant to where we're sitting right now, because we have the Anglia-Ruskin University and we are sitting in the land of John Ruskin. And you say, in searching for the right path for each of us, as John Ruskin once wrote, the true question is not how many plows have you, but where are your furrows? What have you done to participate? What have you done to serve others? What have you done to make a brighter world? Which is a very good way to throw down the gauntlet to us all. And it sounds very abstract, unless you read a bit earlier in the book and you tell a lovely story about how back in 1874, John Ruskin inspired and led a troop of a dozen students in Oxford's Balliol College not Cambridge, but hey, we'll forgive them that. Including the future playwright Oscar Wilde, in an endeavor decidedly unlike what the scholarly young Oxford men of that time ordinarily attempted. They set out to replace a boggy and unpassable pathway by building a road between the two villages, and it goes on, two villages in Oxfordshire. John Ruskin joined in the digging, and in time their numbers rose to about 80. Now, you go on to say that amid all this digging, in fact, they never actually built the road. However, the sheer act of getting all those young people together from Oxford to go out and get digging helped to create an extraordinary civic movement. So it's a really interesting story because, you know, you talk about these lofty ideas from Greece about what democracy is. And yet you're also saying that we need to get out and get digging as human beings to recreate democracy. And maybe environmental action is one way to actually get people to start participating and actually forming groups to actually act. Do you see much sign that that's actually happening today, though?
Oh, yes, I do. And personally, I've been committed to that for decades. As I discuss in the book, I'm a great fan of John Dewey, who believed in living democracy, the great American pragmatist, and also Hannah Arendt. If you've read some of her books, you know that she was all about creating actual human action, collective action, which is what we can't seem to do nowadays. She quite beautifully described the birth of every single human being as the opportunity for the human species to create something new. And it's something new that we need in form of the new forms of democratic participatory governance that I'm proposing. As for Ruskin, I've been following Ruskin's thinking since I was a teenager. In fact, he inspired me to do something similar when I first ran for Congress in Florida. All my personal reminiscences, to the extent that they're in the book, are all in the footnotes. And I think I footnote there my Citizen Saturdays. Now, what were those? Well, I'm a Democrat who was elected in an overwhelmingly Republican district in Central Florida. I was the first Democrat elected in a majority Republican district in the history of the South, and the first one reelected. And I did that in part because I was able to blunt partisanship, both for practical, political, but especially idealistic reasons. I did not have formal town meetings in the conventional sense. I had what we called Citizen Saturdays. They were volunteer community projects that I organized. Over the course of my congressional service, until I decided not to seek a third term, we did 250 Citizen Saturdays. We tutored disadvantaged kids. We cleaned up beaches and rivers and lakes. We came together, 7,000 volunteers, to repair and rebuild launch pads at the Kennedy Space Center where the Apollo astronauts died in a fire. This type of participatory democracy, of democratic action, is what I've been always committed to doing.
So it's kind of doing, not just talking.
It's doing. And as I explain in the book, although I set out a lot of procedures and a lot of considerations for how we might structure these new forms of governance, much of it will be done through learning by doing.
Right. I mean, the reality is that in America today, you have a government, a White House, that appears to be intent on undermining many aspects of democracy, or at least using executive power to override it, inspired by all kinds of figures like Curtis Yarvin and others who are questioning, some of the techno-libertarians, the whole idea of democracy. And then at the grassroots, you have what seems like a lot of apathy amongst the younger generation. And it's very noticeable that you've not had mass protests in the streets from young students around the attacks on democracy or even around issues like climate change. I mean, there's been remarkably quiescent response to what's been going on. Does that surprise you or depress you?
I think there are more protests than there may appear to be from here in the UK. They're not getting coverage in the United States. There are fewer and fewer media outlets, and among them there are fewer and fewer who would want to cover these protests. There are quite a few. I think there will be many, especially if some of the pending legislative proposals are actually enacted and enter into force because of the consequences they will have. But there should be more. And while I'm all in favor of peaceful protest, and I've done a bit of it myself along the way, dating back to Vietnam, I think what young people need to be, again, doing, and some are beginning doing, is actually engaging in positive action to make change. And therefore, I recommend to them all of these sustainable development networks all over the world. And by young people, I mean people all over the world. My message is not to Americans. My American message is to humanity, because over and above everything else, I believe humanity should begin to act as one. I was one of the principal sponsors of the International Space Station back in the 1990s when the United States and other countries sent it into orbit. It's still there, at least for now. I was one of those who insisted that it become an international space station. I'm a practical guy. We saw that as a fiscal change. But in fact, it was an expression of idealism. I believe that humanity should go into space as one. Our exploration as a species should be as one. Every astronaut I ever met, and I met many because they would come back from shuttle and other missions to meet with me when I was in the Congress, told me about the blue dot. You know the blue dot, you've seen the photo. Well, they saw it in reality. And they said, once you see Earth and how small it is and how expansive the rest of the universe is, then you realize we are really all in this together. Carl Sagan was one of my mentors.
Yeah. So in terms of practicality, though, I mean, there's a tremendous attack right now in America on the green agenda. And that is leading to, even places in Europe to step away or water down green commitments. Do you think we've really seen the tide turn decisively against green movements and against green action?
No, because despite what the political polls or pundits or the politicians themselves may say or do, climate change and biodiversity loss and other ecological challenges are happening and accelerating. They're already here, and their impacts are only going to grow. Ignoring them won't make it less so. So eventually, one of three things is going to happen. One is we'll keep doing what we're doing now, which is not much. And this concatenation of events will continue, and the negative impacts on all of us of all of these climate and other ecological changes will intensify, and our situation economically, humanly, will get worse. Another is that we'll end up with some form of green authoritarianism in which it becomes undeniable that something has to be done. But instead of taking democratic approaches to do it, non-democratic solutions will be imposed on us. I've been reading a lot about the degrowth movement here lately, and a lot of books about degrowth. Some of them are very enlightening, I agree with a lot that they say in some of their premises, but some of them also end up saying that, well, everyone's had a chance to change, but they didn't, so now they're going to have to be made to change. A recollection, I guess, of Rousseau's notion that people have to be forced to be free.
Mm.
Well, I don't think that's what needs to be done. The third option is the one I'm proposing, which is that we double down on democracy. We actually create genuine democracy instead of the competition between competing groups of the privileged and the wealthy and the elite that we have in some of what are supposed to be our most successful democracies, and that we actually make, and if necessary, fight for democracy elsewhere in the world. That's what we need to do. That's the only way forward that I've seen. I've been trying my best on my own and working especially with other people to try to advance these causes for more than half a century. And this is my conclusion.
But in reality, we're living in an increasingly populist age where green issues do not appear to chime well with populism.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And I think that's because of the distrust I mentioned earlier. People certainly do not trust what they're told. And increasingly what they're told isn't true. So it becomes, first of all, a question of getting people to listen, then getting them to be able to discern truth from fiction and fantasy, and then getting them to believe that by taking action, things can become better, not worse. And my belief is that if you don't give them an opportunity to participate in decision-making, even if it's only an opportunity, an equal opportunity with everyone else by random selection to be chosen to participate, then they're never going to trust the actions of those who try to engage in the collective actions of all kinds that are needed.
I mean, one of the bitter ironies, having spent a lot of time talking with Mark Carney over the years about this, is that firstly, Mark has pointed out repeatedly in public that, there has been, there's likely to be what he calls climate change Minsky moments, when suddenly the world wakes up and realizes that it's been ignoring climate change for such a long time, it's causing devastation, and then governments step in and impose dramatic regulatory shifts. Call that green authoritarianism if you like. So suddenly markets react, they get shocked, and we suddenly have dramatic regulatory reactions or forms of, if not mitigation reactions and adaptation reactions imposed on countries. Do you really think we can avoid that if the climate change trajectory is so bad? And how does that possibly square with any vision of international cooperation of the sort that you've been working on at the WTO? Because the other great irony of the situation today is that, we used to think that climate change would spark geopolitical cooperation around the world. And in reality, it's unleashed massive geostrategic competition, not collaboration, because countries like China have, dominated the green supply chain.
Well, I've been to more climate COPs than I care to recall, so you're certainly right in your description of what's happened. I'm also a great admirer of Mark Carney. I know I'm an American and he's a Canadian, but I admire him nonetheless.
I think you're all North American these days.
And wish him.
He may yet be part of the 51st state.
I wish him great success. I think he has set out one of the situations that may occur. And whether that response you described is one of authoritarianism or one of democracy depends on what we do between now and then. I think that more and different regulations, more and different consumer choices, more indifferent consumption choices are all much needed. But I think they're going to be more likely to happen, and they're going to be more likely to be the best ones if they emerge democratically, especially through a combination of the best of individual wisdom, in which I would put Carney, and the best of collective wisdom, in which I would put the 8 billion or so people in the world. I read one of these books by a woman who shall remain nameless for these purposes about what we need to do. And she said that the main thing we need to do to be able to have a sustainable world is to reduce the human population back to what it was in 1800, which was 1 billion people. If you read how she recommends going about doing that, her principal recommendation is for a free supply of contraception worldwide, which I support. But if she were here, I would ask her, what about the other 7.2 billion people who are already here? Well, that's an extreme case. But I would much rather create a structure of governance in which people were deciding for themselves what kinds of changes they want to make than having some elite, former head of the Bank of England, or a bunch of technocrats, somebody decide for them.
But arguably, the only place I've ever lived or ever seen which appears to have even a proper, vaguely proper democracy is Switzerland, where you have, a lot of local democracy, cantons actually, exercising real control. And that's partly because people pay taxes and see where their money's being paid. Now, ironically, Galatan, a Swiss, has a statue, or rather there is a statue of Galatan outside the US Federal Treasury in Washington, because he inspired a lot of the federal structure in America today. But America's
not. He was Secretary of the Treasury.
He was Secretary of the Treasury. America's nothing like Switzerland today. So I guess the question I have is, does democracy only work in small countries?
No. I must say that Switzerland comes closer than anyone else to achieving what I've been talking about. It's true that I was in Switzerland off and on for a number of years, and I have great admiration for the Swiss and for most of their form of governance. It's much closer to being participatory. There are differences between what they do and what I propose, but it's much closer than anyone else. No, we had this debate in the United States at the beginning of our democratic republic. And one of the reasons we decided on a representative form of democracy was because the founders of our country doubted we could have actual direct democracy on such a large scale as 13 colonies along the Atlantic seaboard. But they clearly viewed representative democracy as a second best necessary solution to the problem of having such a large geographical scope. I think the answer lies in something that the Athenians didn't have, which is mathematics.
As opposed to iPhones.
The Athenians didn't know about the laws of probability, and they didn't know about scientific random sampling, although effectively they practiced it in their random selection through the use of an ancient stone machine called a claroterion. More on that in the book. But it's through scientific random sampling that we can make certain that a relatively small, randomly selected group of people can be a reflective mirror of a large population. One of my challenges in life is that I have to oftentimes explain things that are counterintuitive. Comparative advantage in trade is counterintuitive. It's the opposite of what you might initially think. And random sampling is the same way. And what matters in random sampling is not the size of the population, but the size of the sample and the fact that it is truly random. If the sample is large enough, then you can randomly select a small group of people who would be reflective of the overall sample and thus of the overall population, however large it is.
Mm. Well, you talk beautifully in the middle of a chapter called Cleisthenes and the Athenian Discover the Path about the way that they practice sortition and rotation, and essentially, took random officials as representative of the population. It's fascinating. But before I go to ask questions from the audience, the other quick question I wanted to ask you is really in relation to WTO and the idea that, free trade is under attack, not just amongst Republicans, but Democrats too. I'm curious, and I say I will come to the audience for questions now. If you look forward to 10 years, will the WTO still exist?
The larger question is whether many of our international institutions will still exist in 10 years. I, of course, am an optimist. I feel we have a duty of optimism. I can go on a bit about this in the book. And as one of the founders of the WTO, I certainly believe it's needed. And I think it will continue to exist. The problem we have now is not that one country is trying to destroy the WTO. The problem we have is that one country is ignoring it for the most part. Incidentally, I have, in addition to the new book that's published today, I have a new paper that was published online today by Cato Institute that's titled, What Will Happen If the United States Leaves the WTO? And I explain in this paper why that would be just absolute economic folly for the people of the United States. It's available online if you'd like to read it. Even though we've seen a parade, a potpourri, a sad outpouring of all kinds of trade restrictions of all kinds from my home country here in the past nearly decade now, but accelerated in the past 4 months. The truth of the matter is, according to a new WTO report, that about 83% of all world trade is still conducted in accordance with the basic principles of non-discrimination that are the true heart of the WTO trading system. The WTO is continuing to work, following up on a previous book of mine, Trade Links, in which I proposed numerous ways in which the trading system can be transformed to make it an even more affirmative agent for addressing climate change and other aspects of sustainable development. About half the members of the WTO, nearly 80 countries, are not solely inspired by me, but inspired by these bottom-up groups of which I'm involved, are seeking to negotiate on many of these issues that would change the WTO rules. This is what we need to be doing. But as I explained before, I don't think the trust is going to exist in the world among people at the grassroots to support any of these necessary global actions unless they themselves have an opportunity to have an equal say in making those decisions.
Right. So any questions on, got questions, hands rising already. Right, over to you first. Yeah.
If you tell me who you are first, that would be nice.
Yeah. 30 is not, but we're not compulsory to identify yourself, and please keep the questions short.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. No, as I said earlier, I think these two issues are inescapably interrelated. But I don't think we're going to be able to do what we need to do environmentally unless we also do what we need to do democratically, for some of the reasons that Gillian pointed out.
Got a question right at the back, and then over there.
Would you speak a little more slowly and a little more loudly?
What are your thoughts on democratic peace theory? And do you endorse the claim that prosperous democracies will never go to war with each other?
Well, generally, historically, that's been true. And of course, historically, advocates of free trade, such as I am, have endorsed that theory as well. And there's empirical experience that largely backs it up. Here lately, this has been challenged, has it not? And it's unclear to me whether some of these commercial disputes we have among democracies may remain purely commercial disputes and not turn into something else. Underlying that theory is the assumption that on the part of leadership, there will be rational behavior. And that's not occurring everywhere in the world at this time.
It's worth remembering that Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, has what I call this 5-part TTCCS theory, that you have trade wars, tech wars, cyber wars, capital wars, and then shooting wars, often, but not always in that order.
Hi, James. My name's Jennifer. I am also from America, and I just graduated with my EMBA just in May here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I guess I'm looking for a little bit of optimism, which you said that you hold close to your heart. I'm seeing in the US extreme divisiveness and obviously ethnocentrism, with us pulling away, dropping out of agreements, as you said, potential with WTO, UN, et cetera. How do we come back together as a globe? It seems a bit dire, and it seems like other countries are sort of following suit with becoming more and more nationalistic and thinking less big picture.
Yeah, the recent elections in Poland show that.
Yep.
It's not going to be done from the top down anywhere in the world. It's not going to be done simply by electing the right president of any country. It's going to have to be done from the bottom up, with people coming together in new participatory ways and learning new ways of doing things that work. And as I advocate in the book, having a say in decisions about what to do so that proposed actions can indeed work. There's an abundance of empirical evidence that democracies work better than non-democracies. But democracies could work even better if they were actually truly democracies, is my view. And therefore, my proposal is a radical proposal that, to my mind, is not really radical at all. It's about simply believing what we say when we say that people are capable of governing themselves. If we truly believe that people are capable of governing themselves, as I do, then we should let them do it.
Polite way of saying, get digging ditches. Got a question over there, and then a question over there.
I dug a ditch or two on these Citizen Saturdays. I don't think my lower back would appreciate it today.
It's worth saying, by the way, that Taiwan is a country that's got some very interesting experiments in citizen democracy right now going on digital platforms. But we had Audrey Tang in recently, who is a former digital minister of Taiwan, talking about this.
Hi, Jenna Azamara-Andrews. I'm a PhD at Earth
I
Sciences.
cannot hear you.
Jenna Azamara-Andrews. I'm a PhD at Earth Sciences. And I was just wondering, do you not think it might be unfair that the average person who, although they feel the negative impacts of these undemocratic
I
countries,
don't understand a word she
I
said.
also, okay, tell me, I'll say it again.
sorry, is it not unfair that the average people who will experience the negative impacts of undemocratic countries should have to be the ones to fight back against a state who's meant to be helping them?
So why do the victims of authoritarianism have to have the responsibility of being the ones to act?
Because that's what self-governance is about. You have to first claim a space in which you can govern yourselves. And sometimes that's a matter of protest. Sometimes that's a matter of raising your voice. Sometimes it's a matter of grabbing a gun or standing in front of a tank. We shouldn't be waiting for some magic leader to appear and save us. We have to take action ourselves, wherever we might be.
Yeah, places like Ukraine have shown that.
Speak up a little bit.
Yeah, there are always people and groups who like to accumulate power and
Like what?
accumulate power.
Accumulate, yes, they do.
And that's a human tendency. And there have been periods we've had democracy, but are there aberrations? And the reason I'm asking this is because in the dynamic where people like to accumulate power, there is no stable system by which power will be dissipated, and anybody who wants to accumulate power would be prevented from doing so.
So is a problem that you always have the tendency, it's a bit like capitalism, you always have the tendency for the powerful to grab more and more power, and you can never create a stable functioning democracy for long.
Yours is not an original thought there. That's Schumpeter. You probably know, who said that back about 1940, that all democracies are actually only shields concealing the shadows in which competing oligarchies contest to accumulate power. And that can certainly happen. As I've already said, I think in many, indeed most of our electoral democracies today, what we have are really contestations between different groups who are privileged and wealthy. I think that's true of both political parties in my country, for example. I'll let you make your own decisions about the United Kingdom. I believe that human nature is the same as it was during the ancient Athenian democracy. I don't think it's going to change. The question is whether you appeal to the best or the worst in human nature. We've all heard Lord Acton's famous quote. It's most often misquoted. You've heard it. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But that's not what he said. What he actually said was power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Simply holding power does not mean that you're going to be corrupted by it. The question is what your goals are and how you choose to pursue them. Are you trying to seize and accumulate personal power, or are you trying to maximize the day-to-day power of ordinary people? The reality is that we need more and more people in power who are doing it for the right reasons, which is where my concept of right representation to get the best of individual wisdom comes in. But we also need people who are not seeking power at all, who are chosen by random selection to depart their lives for a while and as volunteers engage in decision-making. We need that as an additional check in the usual checks that are required in the checks and balances of the separation of powers.
Right. Got a question there, and then I'm going to take the question behind, and I know we're running out of time. So, yeah.
Great. Alex Orloff, I'm professor from the States in material science, chemistry, engineering, but also former fellow of King's and graduate from Cambridge. So first of all, it's wonderful that you referred to ancient Greece, because the very first landfill and recycling site was in Crete, 3000 BC. So it's an inspirational example. But the question I have is that about the concept of participation, because, for example, I reviewed a number of documents for the UN, whether it's IPCC or Global Environmental Outlook, and there is a participation from different countries, but the question is about enforcement, right? How that can be translated into actions. And I understand that WTO has a different mechanism about the enforcement. So do you see any parallels of how what WTO is doing that can be implemented for sustainability and environmental protection?
Very good question. And here I become the international law professor and the former jurist. I talk about this in the book because I believe that the new systems of governance that are needed must be multi-level, multi-connected, interactive, and ever engaged in an ongoing debate about appropriate democratic action. How will these things be accomplished? The key way to accomplish these things is through rules, or what we lawyers call laws. There must be agreed rules. These rules must be implemented. They must be upheld. They must be open to change through democratic action. And that's what we have had with the World Trade Organization and its dispute settlement mechanism. That's what we ought to have, but do not have with many other international institutions. I was one of the two lawyers on something called the high-level advisory panel to the president of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change a decade ago. In other words, I was one of the legal advisors to the Climate COP on the Paris Agreement. And the other lawyer and I, his name is James Cameron, he's from the UK, brilliant barrister and a great climate advocate. We encouraged the nation states that were negotiating to include a dispute settlement mechanism in their agreement. That was a legal bridge too far for those negotiations. But here we are, we're having climate disputes because these are disputes that affect trade. The ultimate jurisdiction is not in the climate COP, it's in the WTO, dispute settlement mechanism. Some of those who've decided they oppose the WTO dispute settlement system in the United States have accused the system and the judges in it of overreaching. I disagree. Most of their criticisms are bogus. But the real problem is that the nation states as a whole are underreaching in their willingness to commit some of their sovereignty to engaging in collective action. And collective action can only work if it can be upheld and enforced.
Yeah, I think the problem is right now that nobody is reaching at all. And therein lies the value of your book. I think we're out of time. I know that many people have got to rush off in a few moments, and I know there are still some questions that want to be asked. So I suggest to you that you come up now and grab Jim and ask him directly, because he's very keen to engage. He will be around in Cambridge for a bit. I am actually going to do a dinner for Jim in a couple of weeks' time. So if anyone wants to come along on June the 18th to dinner with him, email Camilla, who can then pass it on to me, or email me if you want directly at provost@king. Yeah, no, yeah, okay. Email me at provost.
Let me add too.
And
tomorrow at 6, down the street at the Cambridge Bookshop, there will be an informal reception in the form of a book launch. Free drinks and snacks.
Exactly. So if
I
anyone
will
wants-
also be there, but
Okay. The drinks and the books are the key draws. So
from
yeah,
6 to 7:30.
yeah. And one thing I'll just say, by the way, since I know many of you are interested in international economics, I've just found out that President Bostic from the Atlanta Fed will be coming here on June the 1st or 2nd. So if anyone's interested in coming to hear him and asking him whether he thinks the Fed can stay independent under Trump or not, and what the hell's actually happening to the US economy, do come along to that as well. I will, and the UK economy, by the way, I will send details of that across to Kamiar too. But anyway, it just reminds me to say a huge thank you to Jim, both for his talk and for his book, but most importantly, for his inspiring example of public service and his own personal willingness to get involved in doing the equivalent of digging ditches like Ruskin in a 21st century way. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And I'm going to leave it to Kamiar to decide who to give the books to.
Gosh, I think the book, there are 3 copies. One person was going to ask a question, but we ran out of time. So I hope your question was good, because otherwise you better ask it. And then who else asked a question? Could you put your hands up?
Okay.
Did you ask a question? You just made that up. Oops. So I'm gonna go. Put your hands up. I'm gonna give one. I give one to. I was gonna go that way. I go to you. Did you ask a question? You wanted to. I give one to Annika and one to Jen. There you go. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Very much appreciated.